So now we're going to be talking about the three biggest induction traps that you want to avoid. And I kind of already teased at this when I mentioned all of the things that they use as excuses to push you into an induction. But now we're going to dive deeper into this. So there's three really common reasons that induction gets pushed on moms that are not evidence-based, but oftentimes you'll see these in the mom groups, and they are that you don't have any sign of labor before 40 weeks. So this kind of manifests as you thinking, oh, I'm not showing any signs of labor progress. I'm not showing any signs like that my body's going to go into labor anytime soon. So you get into the mom groups and you ask the moms, how do I have some natural induction methods to push myself into going into labor? Now, why this is a trap, even if your care provider isn't yet pushing induction on you, but you know that it's coming, is that first of all, it puts you in fear because you're like, I have to get into labor before this arbitrary date on the calendar in order to avoid this bigger problem of this induction that I don't want. And so you're trying to do all of the things. Now referring back to what I was telling you in session 2, when we were discussing true natural birth and what it looks like, you need to understand again that if you don't show any signs of labor starting before 40 weeks, that's okay. You also need to understand that you don't have to show any signs of labor starting before labor starts. So you might have cervical dilation, you might not. I went into this in greater detail back in your True Natural Birth 101 and about what you want to know with early labor and what I call prodromal labor. If you are not showing any signs of labor before 40 weeks, all that means is that you're not showing any signs of labor yet. That doesn't mean you're not going into labor in the next few weeks or even in the next few days. In fact, you could even go into labor that night. But if you're thinking to yourself, I'm not showing any signs of labor and I need to get things going, what I talked about again, when it comes to the idea of doing all of the things, is that you are then possibly sabotaging your ability to go into labor because your body has not shown any signals saying that your baby is ready. But now you're suddenly trying to do all of the things to get yourself into labor. Remember, your baby is the one who's driving this. Your baby is the one who is perfecting their systems. Your baby can't go any faster than they already can. And it doesn't matter how much evening primrose oil tablets you stick up your vagina. It doesn't matter how much red raspberry leaf tea you drink. It doesn't matter how many times you have an orgasm with your partner. It doesn't matter how much acupressure you do, the walking, the spicy food, all of it. It doesn't matter because your baby is the one that's going to say, hey, we're ready to go. Until that point, all you're doing is stressing out your body, stressing out yourself, getting into that fear and panic because you're not going into labor, you're not showing signs of labor, and you're thinking my body is broken and defective, when really what's going on is it's just not time yet. And it's okay that it's not time yet. In fact, the medical system, when they undermine your confidence like that, it actually is a self-fulfilling prophecy where you are more likely to agree to induction methods, even soft induction methods like a membrane sweep or agreeing to castor oil or just trying to do more walking, more sex, nipple stimulation, all of these things that you see in the mom groups and the tips on how to get into labor. You cannot get yourself into labor. You can't. I'm sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear, but you can't. I can tell you this from experience. My daughter was showing me signs of labor going to start for 4 weeks, from 37 weeks all the way past 40 weeks. And she came at 40 weeks in almost 3 days. She just put me in and out of it. And it stressed me out. And I understood that she was on her own timeline and I couldn't push it, but I still tried to push it. And all it did was make me miserable. So no, doesn't matter how much evening primrose oil you shove up there. It's not going to work. Doesn't matter how much you drink that red raspberry leaf tea. It's not going to work. Doesn't matter how much walking you do. Doesn't matter how much you bounce on that yoga ball. Doesn't matter how much you drag your partner to the bedroom. It's not going to work. The only way to get that baby out before they're ready is a C-section. Even if you try to do a medical induction, if baby's not ready, it's a C-section. So I need you to really recognize that. If baby is not ready and you try to get them out, the only way that they're coming out early is a C-section because they're not ready. Their digestive system isn't ready, their nervous system is not ready, or their respiratory system is not ready, or all three. And it doesn't matter if your baby is already 38 weeks because they all have their own growth curve. Common reason number 2 is a suspected big baby or small for dates. It can go either way. Now, if you happen to be of a larger size, then they might tell you that your baby is going to be massive. If you are a smaller frame, they might tell you your baby's going to be massive or your baby's too small for dates. So it can go in either direction. I got the your baby is too small scare tactic. It turns out babies, again, grow on their own growth curve. So there is a big difference between an intrauterine growth restriction, which is an indication to get baby out, but you don't want to do it with an induction. If they are actually suggesting that you induce an IUGR baby, really question that. Because inside of Rachel Reed's book, Why Induction Matters, she actually talks about the fact that a true IUGR baby, a truly growth restricted baby, is going to be stressed out by the Pitocin. They are going to have troubles. They will actually do better if they come on their own. And sometimes your body will spontaneously go into labor to get the baby out so that they can be on the outside. So if that is the case, you can recognize whether your baby is actually not doing well and needs to come out now, in which case it's a C-section, and you can plan a gentle C-section. And if it's not the case, then you can be like, oh, I've got more time, and they're scheduling your induction for a couple weeks away. Really question it. This is how I managed to avoid an induction with my son, is that they kept saying the words IUGR. They kept saying he was growth restricted. They kept saying he was too small, but he was kicking up a storm. I was still growing. My belly was still growing, and nobody was pushing to say, you know what, from this non-stress test or from this ultrasound, it shows that he is really not doing too well and proving to me that something was wrong. And it's like, if something was truly wrong, they would have taken him. They would have said, we have to get him out now or he's gone. And they didn't. Instead, they were like, well, you have to have him in the hospital. Yeah. Well, he might not be able to tolerate labor. Well, yeah. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, if there's really a problem, they would have taken him. So until that point, I'm not inducing, I'm not planning anything. So recognizing that side of things. The other side of the big baby, your body will not grow a baby too big to birth. The only exception to that rule is if you have uncontrolled diabetes or gestational diabetes. And I say uncontrolled because there are women who have had gestational diabetes or even type 1 diabetes. They've had bigger babies, but they have been able to still birth them. So those babies were meant to be that size. And there are also women with gestational diabetes who have small babies. So it doesn't really mean anything if they say your baby is big. First of all, if they tell you that your baby is big, they can't actually guess that accurately. It's within 15% of their actual rate of growth. And when you recognize that a 7-pound and 11-ounce baby can be seen on a growth scan and be guessed at 9 pounds, and really they're only 7 pounds 13 ounces or 7 pounds 11 ounces, then you're like, oh, baby's not actually that big. So with growth scans, you really have to be careful. If your care provider is telling you your baby's too big to birth and you're going to have a C-section or you're going to have an induction, say, you know what? I'm going to go into labor. I'm going to see how this goes. And if something gets to the point where I'm like, you know what? I need to have a C-section, I will, but I'm not going to induce, because if you induce and your baby is actually on the larger side, this can then lead to them getting stuck, because now they're not able to navigate the pelvis properly. Because as I said before, like Pitocin contractions, they are not like regular contractions. I talked about that inside the True Natural Birth 101 session. So go back and refresh your memory if you need to remember how the uterus actually works. But with induction, this hyperstimulates the uterus to try to smack the baby out like a bottle of ketchup. And when you're doing that, it can lead to them getting stuck. Okay, so the last one, and I already kind of hinted at this, is going past 42 weeks. This is not the dire emergency that people think it is. They always hear the stillbirth rate and they're like, oh, the stillbirth rate doubles or the stillbirth rate triples after a certain number of like weeks, and they panic. But that rate is less than 1%. It's 1 per 1,000 at 41 weeks, going to 2 per 1,000 at 42 weeks, to 3 per 1,000 at 43 weeks, to 5 per 1,000 after 43 weeks. That's the numbers. You can verify this by going and checking out Rachel Reed's book, Why Induction Matters, and she breaks down the actual stats. But the truth is that going past 42 weeks, this is a very slim, minuscule chance that this is going to happen. Very slim. And there's so many more induction traps that I'd love to get into. And before we get deeper into this, I just want to let you know that I also included the induction trap guide, everything you need to know about weighing the pros and cons of induction and avoid falling for the common scare tactics. So this goes into a deeper dive of things that you need to know. It also includes the questions to ask before you agree to an induction. So I included both of these guides in this session so that you do have the opportunity to just, like, if you don't have time to go and get your workbook or you haven't written a lot of notes, you do have these guides to also refer to. You can also throw them into a Google Drive and you can refer to them anytime you want. You can also just basically have the overview, take some notes, recognize that, yes, there are a lot of traps when it comes to induction, and we have an induction epidemic right now. And that is leading to more birth trauma, more pain, more complications, and C-sections. All right, so that's all I have for you in this part of the training. Take a deep breath, go get a glass of water. If you want to come back and watch another one, you can. If you want to dive right in, you can. But I really wanted to give you these breaks because if you're currently pregnant, I know you probably have to pee. So go do that. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.